I think the key thing for the court in Strasbourg is that it needs to try to move towards fulfilling an overarching role, but trying not to be dragged into too much of the detail of the way in which the Convention is implemented in European countries. I think this is a real challenge for it because we have to accept that what's happened, particularly with the arrival of so many states from Eastern Europe, where there was no tradition of democracy, is that the court's been turned into a final court of appeal for many of those countries, which still have rather shaky justice systems. And the consequence of that has, I think, tended to lead to the court micromanaging too much the way in which the Convention operates. It's quite clear if you read the Convention that it's the duty of the member states to implement it. It's the duty of the member states at the parliamentary and administrative level, and it's a duty of the member states through their court systems, and that's why most countries have now incorporated the Convention in their own law. And that does mean that there are going to be some variations in the way in which the Convention is interpreted and applied for individual circumstances. And the Convention itself provides for that. It's called the margin of appreciation, and the court should respect it. And I think some of the problems we've had over the last 4 or 5 years has been, firstly, a court which is being almost overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the work it's getting. At one stage, its backlog went up to 160,000 cases. And secondly, I think as it tried to plough through that work, a tendency to try to lay down too uniform rules and not to give enough respect to individual states' interpretation. If we can move away from that, and there's a lot of sign that that is already happening, then I think the court will firstly find its workload reduces, and its workload will partly reduce because it'll be sieving out cases more effectively. This has already happened. The backlog is down to below 100,000. Secondly, I think its relations with the Supreme Courts of nations, making it up, will develop more, and there's more of a dialogue happening. So I'm actually an optimist about the direction of travel of the court at the moment, and far from saying the court needs some further root and branch reform, I don't believe that's the case at all. But what the court does need to do is to build on the changes that have been brought about in the last 4 years. As you may know, we had the Brighton Declaration in 2012, which was when the UK had the presidency, and Ken Clarke, who was then Lord Chancellor, and I did the diplomatic footwork to bring together the 47 nation states and try to look at how the court was working. And although we didn't achieve everything we wanted, we achieved quite a lot of change, including putting in the preamble the necessity for the court to have regard to the principle of subsidiarity and the margin of appreciation that went with it. So for all those reasons, I would rather hope that in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to see things continue to get better for the court. And I certainly detected a much more optimistic note in the court itself that they're getting on top of the workload. The final thing the court does need to pay attention to is the quality of its judges. It's not so much that they're not well versed in law, but there's a great need for there to be judges who are familiar with the real world of judging and not just academic lawyers. That's a challenge for every nation state, including our own, because it implies that we need good career structures with people going to serve in Strasbourg, but being able to come back as well. I see no reason why it shouldn't. I mean, obviously, I'm conscious that my own party has come up with a series of proposals which put it on a collision course with the Council of Europe. But I'm quietly optimistic that this will in practice not happen. All political parties, including my own, are committed to the principles set out in the Convention. So for those reasons, I think the Convention is beginning to acquire something of a benchmark quality. And in a country where we have the common law, where historically people are very wary of what they see as new inventions introduced into law, that's quite an important and subtle moment where a change starts to command greater acceptance. So I would hope that whoever's in government after next May will be promoting reform in Strasbourg still, encouraging a dialogue with the court, but also upholding the Convention's principles and our international legal obligations. There's certainly the possibility of having a United Kingdom Bill of Rights. I promoted one within my own party before the 2010 election. But for me, a Bill of Rights has got to be compatible with our adherence to the Convention. If we create a Bill of Rights which means we're not compliant with the Convention, then you're on a collision course that is going to end very badly. Now, I know in Northern Ireland there's consideration of whether Northern Ireland should have its own distinctive Bill of Rights. I've always been of the opinion that it would be possible within a United Kingdom Bill of Rights to have sections which focus on some Northern Ireland issues. And of course, the principle behind the Good Friday Agreement allowed for the possibility that there would be a separate Bill of Rights for Northern Ireland. That's very much a question for determination here, not for us in London, but I don't see these two things as incompatible.